Emily, something happened. Molly was left by a guest.
Emily, something happened. Molly was left by a guest.
Emily was lying on the bed in a VIP room on the top floor of the club, having just finished an intense session of passion. Her mind was blank, and it took her a moment to recall who the little girl named Molly was. The shower door opened, and Daniel emerged, wrapped in a towel, his muscular upper body exposed. As he walked to the bed, Emily clung to his chest.
Something came up, I need to handle it.
Daniel found his glasses on the bedside table and slowly cleaned them.
Every time I come here, something happens. Although I left this place for you to manage, you don't have to handle everything yourself.
Don't go, she said, lifting her to the balcony. I want to try it here.
Emily hesitated, and the phone rang again. Without further delay, she pushed Daniel away and gave him a passionate kiss.
They can't do without me. I'll be back soon.
When Emily arrived at the private room, Molly was kneeling on the floor, hugging herself, her eyes vacant, and her childish face still streaked with tears. Her uniform had a button torn off, and Emily took the assistant's coat and covered her.
Emily, I'm sorry.
Emily ignored her, stood up, and looked around, recognizing several familiar faces.
Mr. Thomas, we're all familiar here, so I won't be polite. You know the rules here. How could someone like you trouble a little girl?
Thomas looked embarrassed and kept glancing in a certain direction. Seeing that figure, Emily's heart skipped a beat. Thomas was a cowardly bully, and she wasn't afraid to confront him.
Manager Joe, you're overreacting. Look how scared our Mr. Thomas is. It was just a little girl pouring a drink, and I don't know why she almost fell. I was just being kind and helped her up. How could I know your uniforms are so fragile?
Seeing Molly's tears flow even more, Emily knew James was lying. She didn't want to talk to him any longer, so she exchanged a few polite words and prepared to take Molly away.
If you're working in a place like this, you should be mentally prepared. If you can't handle it, leave. You can't have it both ways.
If earning money through hard work makes someone a bad person, then who here isn't one?
You! This little brat! Who are you insulting?
James stood up, his eyes slightly drunk, and raised his chin.
Manager Joe, is this how you treat guests? Come over and apologize.
Emily clenched her fists and took a deep breath. The relationship between the Lin and Chen families was complicated, and she convinced herself not to cause trouble for Daniel.
I lost my temper earlier. I apologize to all of you.
She downed the glass in one go and bowed slightly to James.
Sorry, Mr. James.
Is this Manager Joe's sincerity?
He personally mixed a drink for her, using almost every type of alcohol in the room, along with some leftover food.
Drink this, and you can take her away.
James sat back down, and the people around started cheering. He held a cigarette in his mouth, looking arrogant, completely different from before. Emily looked at the special mix and felt a bit disheartened. She held the glass, ready to accept her fate. But just as she brought it to her lips, the unpleasant smell still lingering, the glass was snatched away. Emily turned her head, and Daniel's stern face came into view. The next moment, the entire drink was poured onto James' face. The room fell silent, and James, coming to his senses, cursed loudly.
Do you even deserve to be called a man?
Outside the room, Daniel let go of Emily's hand and glanced at his watch.
I have something to take care of. I'll be back before 10.
Emily stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. For the first time in her life, she kissed him in public. Daniel was always unpredictable, and she didn't want to know what he thought of her actions. But she didn't expect him to kiss her back, passionately. It was 11:30 when Daniel returned, smelling of alcohol. The suite on the top floor had become their exclusive place. They made up for the session on the balcony in the early hours. Daniel seemed particularly energetic today, and Emily was overwhelmed by wave after wave. Afterwards, he carried her to clean up, and they had another round in the bathtub. Back in bed, she nestled in his arms.
Did something happen? You were late.
He played with her hair.
Nothing, just some idiots at home trying to take a project from me. I couldn't be too harsh because of the old man.
Emily stayed silent for a while, and Daniel massaged her shoulders.
Are you upset because I wasn't on time?
No.
Is it because of what happened during the day? I've already instructed Michael to revoke the membership of everyone in that room. You won't see them again. How about we go shopping tomorrow?
Emily was, of course, happy that Daniel wanted to cheer her up. She nodded while straddling his waist.
I'm not that delicate. Those people have millions in their cards. Why cancel them? We might as well earn it.
You're so petty. We don't need their millions.
I do.
Daniel suddenly realized something inside.
I didn't mean anything by it.
I know.
What's the story with that little girl?
Emily casually mentioned Molly's situation.
Do you want to help her?
Emily hesitated for a moment and nodded. Regarding Molly, she wasn't sure what she felt. Emily's background was similar to Molly's, coming from a farming family. At 16 or 17, she headed south with a few hundred yuan and a lot of courage to find work. The difference was, Molly had to drop out of school because of her critically ill father, while Emily had no such sympathetic reason. It wasn't because her family was too poor, nor did she have siblings or parents to support, nor had she faced any catastrophic events. It was simply because of the backward living environment and her parents' lack of emphasis on education. As an ordinary girl, she didn't have the awareness that education is the simplest way to understand the world. The conversation started on a serious note.
What's the story with that little girl?
Oh, that's Molly. Her situation is quite complicated.
Do you want to help her?
I nodded, unsure of my own feelings. My background was similar to Molly's, coming from a farming family. At 16 or 17, I headed south with a few hundred yuan and a lot of courage to find work. Unlike her, I didn't have a sympathetic reason to drop out of school. It wasn't because my family was too poor, nor did I have siblings or parents to support, nor had I faced any catastrophic events. It was simply because of the backward living environment and my parents' lack of emphasis on education. As an ordinary girl, I didn't have the awareness that education is the simplest way to understand the world. James was in his early 20s back then, a young and impulsive guy who claimed to have fallen in love with me at first sight and pursued me fervently. I was at the age of first love, and James was tall, handsome, and had a generous and humorous personality. I quickly fell for him. We were indeed deeply in love. We dated for 3 years, and our feelings only grew stronger. When I turned 20, he said he wanted to marry me and took me to meet his parents. I had my doubts, but I was truly blinded by love. His family's conditions were much better than I had imagined, and I was almost overwhelmed by inferiority. But thinking of him, my heart was filled with unprecedented courage. At that time, I believed that as long as he was there, nothing could stop our love. To my surprise, his parents were very kind. At the dinner table, they showed concern for me, and when talking about my background and experiences, they even shed tears. I naively thought that this hurdle was easily overcome. Until one day, I received a call from his mother.
The Chun family's business is vast, beyond your imagination. The future daughter-in-law of the Chun family cannot come from a farming background with only a middle school education. Not only do we disagree, but the company's shareholders won't agree either. James is still a child, and doesn't understand, but I hope you can guide him out of this relationship. I really like you, but please understand our difficulties.
How could I not see through it? But it was also the first time I realized why people always discussed the importance of matching social status online. It turned out that in the 21st century, which advocates equality for all, the concept of social status still existed and would probably never disappear. But at that time, I didn't believe it. I told James about it, and he didn't believe me but still went to question his mother.
Did you say this to her?
Denies. I didn't say anything. How could you accuse me like this?
The result was that his mother denied saying anything, got so angry that she ended up in the hospital. I suddenly understood that between James and me, what seemed close at hand was actually separated by countless insurmountable invisible mountains, perhaps taking several lifetimes to cross.
We should break up.
No, I won't agree to it.
So I quit my job, changed my residence, and decisively ended it. But I have to say, compared to most girls with similar backgrounds, I was lucky because I later met Daniel. Relying on Daniel for so long, it seemed like I hadn't gone out alone for a long time. After leaving the cafe, I wandered aimlessly and unknowingly arrived near the university campus. Inside the high fences, young people were sweating and strolling along tree-lined paths, a youth I could only dream of and never had. To be honest, I regretted it, but I also knew that regret was useless. After collecting my thoughts, I went to the most expensive mall in a city and bought a bunch of luxury items I usually didn't dare to buy. It wasn't because I liked them, in fact, most of the time, I couldn't understand this top-tier fashion. My motivation was somewhat childish, a form of revenge. Because I was using Daniel's card. I just didn't expect to run into the owner of this secondary card in a men's clothing store. Besides him, there was Sophie.
Manager Joe! I didn't expect to run into you here just after returning to the country. What a coincidence!
I smiled and nodded at her, amused by the thought. Daniel had sprayed the ebony cologne I gave him today, and Sophie had a hint of the domineering scent on her.
Are you here to buy clothes for your boyfriend too?
Two? I glanced at Daniel without showing any emotion. He was also looking at me, and I quickly averted my gaze as if electrocuted.
Yes, I'm here to buy him some underwear. This one, the largest size, please wrap it up for me.
I could feel Daniel's intense gaze on me. I tried to stay calm, but my face grew hotter and hotter, almost burning. Sophie smiled ambiguously at me, and I quickly paid and left, almost running away. That was close. Another second, and my heart would have jumped out. Leaving the mall, I drove to the hospital. Molly was outside the ward, and I followed her gaze inside. In just a few days, Molly's mother, sitting by her father's bed, had more gray hair.
Emily, what brings you here today?
Seeing her tear-streaked face, I sighed and tried to persuade her again.
I've paid for another week's expenses. Staying here won't help. Listen to me, go back to school.
Molly bit her lip and didn't speak. She cried for a while, then seemed to make up her mind.
Sis, I can take the exams for my degree. Please let me stay.
I didn't say anything.
Molly's mother arrived for visiting hours. When she saw me, she thanked me profusely and even tried to kneel. I quickly helped her to a nearby seat.
I'm not helping you for free. I can waive the interest, but the principal must be repaid once Molly graduates and starts working.
She looked relieved but still worried.
Molly might be able to reduce some of your burden by working for me now, but there won't be much room for advancement. There are many tasks I'd like to assign to her, but her abilities are limited, and the company won't allow me to take risks. My suggestion is for her to return to school and come back to work for me after she graduates. I believe with Molly's cleverness, she can repay all the debts within 2 or 3 years.
It took Molly's mother a long time to understand my words, but she didn't make a decision immediately. She was waiting for Molly to decide for herself. Despite her young age, Molly was the backbone of the family. Her stubbornness reminded me so much of my younger self that I was overwhelmed by an intense emotion and almost lost control. Before revealing any signs, I quickly left. I didn't return to the club but went back to my small apartment. This was a place I had bought with most of my savings over the years. It was a 50 square meter studio, small but sufficient for just me. I called home, and the sound of mahjong tiles shuffling came through. I called out, "Mom."
You heartless girl, you haven't called me in a month. I thought you were lost.
I've been too busy, really couldn't find the time.
In truth, I wasn't that busy, I just didn't want to face her. Whenever I was overwhelmed by negative emotions, I blamed all my misfortunes on her.
I blamed her for leaving me in the small village when she was young, resulting in no one teaching me what to do and what not to do. I blamed her for not stopping me when I insisted on dropping out of school to work. I blamed her for giving birth to me but not taking responsibility for me. But ultimately, I blamed myself. It was I who gave up the only key to changing my fate.
Sensing my silence, she cautiously asked,
Emily, are you facing any difficulties? Do you want to come home and rest for a few days?
I muted the microphone and took a deep breath.
No, I'm busy. I don't have time to come back. I just got paid and wanted to check on you all.
Her laughter came clearly through the phone.
Oh, my daughter has grown up. Just take care of yourself. Your dad, brother, and I are all doing great.
Then I'll send you some money for playing mahjong.
She laughed and agreed repeatedly. After hanging up, I transferred her 20,000 yuan. She sent several voice messages saying,
Thank you, sweetheart.
I chuckled, tears welling up in my eyes. That evening, Daniel came over, which I didn't expect. I was cooking in the kitchen and didn't turn around.
Sophie just got back. Aren't you going to keep her company?
I'm not her boyfriend. I don't have to spend all my time with her.
I paused while chopping vegetables. Whose boyfriend are you then? I didn't dare to ask. He leaned in to kiss my temple and neck, his hands wandering. I hurriedly pushed him away.
It's almost ready. Go change and join me for dinner.
He obediently left the kitchen, and my frantic heartbeat gradually calmed down. Just now, it almost happened right here. Lately, things have been so strange. When I first started dating James, my heart wasn't this chaotic. When I finished cooking and brought the food out, Daniel was already sitting obediently, waiting for me to serve him. Occasionally, I would get the illusion that we were in a relationship.
What did James want from you? Why did he send his assistant away?
He asked what you gave me that would cost him 10 times as much to make me his secret lover.
Daniel took a sip of red wine.
What did you say?
What else could I say? He's childish, but I can't be childish with him. I'm very satisfied with my current benefactor and have no plans to replace him.
So, you admit to being my secret lover?
I was taken aback. What did he mean by that?
Who did you buy those extra-large underwear for today?
I was even more confused. After dinner that night, Daniel left without doing anything, leaving me completely puzzled. I thought he would lose control, but I was wrong. The next day at the club, my assistant brought me good news. After meeting with James yesterday, I shifted my focus and submitted Molly's father's information to other organizations. Today, I received a response. A kind-hearted person was willing to fund Molly's family, and everything checked out. The contract could be signed. After verifying everything, I immediately asked my assistant to contact Molly's mother to sign the contract. I couldn't let this opportunity slip away. When Molly found out, she called me, crying nonstop on the phone. I'm not good at comforting people, so I just listened quietly until she finished crying.
Emily, my dad's condition has improved. I'm going back to school.
Good girl, you didn't let me down.
I stayed in the penthouse suite and didn't go home, but I didn't see Daniel all night. For several days, even James would occasionally show up, but Daniel was nowhere to be seen. I tried to adapt to everything and focused on my work. Over the years, I was no longer the naive and arrogant girl I once was. In the world of business and pleasure, I had become the adept and graceful manager Joe. I saw James again at a dinner with some executives. This time, he didn't speak to me, just watched coldly as I mingled and laughed with the men. I drank a bit too much and left the dinner before it ended, feeling dizzy. James followed me out. I rubbed my temples and told him to speak quickly.
Daniel is getting engaged to the only daughter of the Jiang family. Are you still going to stay by his side?
Thanks for telling me. I was wondering why he hasn't been around these past few days.
What kind of response is that? Have you fallen so low that you can calmly accept being the other woman?
I didn't know which word hit a nerve, but my face flushed, and I yelled at him.
What do you want me to do? Snatch him away and then be humiliated by his family again?
People were starting to gather around us. The last bit of rationality told me I shouldn't continue arguing with James. But James wouldn't let it go.
Why? What makes him worth all this for you?
Because he never looked down on me.
I shook off James and took a cab back to my apartment. In this vast city, only this small apartment could give me some peace of mind. My heart ached terribly. I thought I had already accepted the ambiguous relationship with Daniel. But when the truth came out, it still hurt more than I could bear. I leaned over the toilet and vomited, then lay in the bathtub, letting the icy water pour over me. It felt like this could help me clear my mind. I didn't know how long I had been soaking in the water when someone woke me up. When I opened my eyes, I saw Sophie, looking exhausted.
Miss Jiang.
I had been moved to the bed. Sophie sighed with relief when she saw I was awake.
You have a lot of nerve, getting drunk and sleeping in the bathtub. Aren't you afraid of drowning? Luckily, my family doctor lives in the same neighborhood. Otherwise, the whole city would know tomorrow that a woman took her own life at home over a broken heart.
She was exaggerating a bit, and I smiled awkwardly. Although I had never had such thoughts, falling asleep in the bathtub was indeed a bit foolish.
Why are you at my place?
Sophie looked at me with her beautiful eyes.
I was on a date with your boss. Daniel got a call from his assistant saying they couldn't find you. He rushed over right away. What a considerate boss.
Sophie wasn't stupid. She could clearly see the relationship between Daniel and me. My place was full of Daniel's belongings. The underwear I bought for him last time was still on the coffee table. I waited quietly for her to finish. She seemed to lose interest and got straight to the point.
When did you two get together?
4 years ago.
The second year after I reunited with him. Sophie burst into tears.
I was only a sophomore then, still emotionally immature. And you already took him away.
I was at a loss for words. I was really bad at comforting people, and her crying left me feeling helpless. Fortunately, she quickly stopped crying.
I thought it was the 2 years I was abroad that gave you the opportunity. It turns out Daniel's grandmother wasn't lying. He never saw me as a woman.
After cursing Daniel, she raised her chin.
He's about to marry me. You should break up with him as soon as possible. Name your price.
I couldn't help but laugh. On one hand, I never thought I would encounter such a TV drama scenario in real life. On the other hand, it was hard to imagine that Sophie was about my age. I envied her. Before I could name a price, Daniel's bodyguards escorted Sophie home. Daniel, on the other hand, was unceremonious. He took a shower and got into bed as if it were his own home. His body was hot, and as soon as he touched me, I felt enveloped in warmth. But I still pushed him away.
I have a fever. Don't catch it.
He didn't care and quickly undressed me. I know.
What's the story with that little girl?
I casually mentioned Molly's situation.
Do you want to help her?
I hesitated for a moment and nodded. I wasn't sure what I felt about Molly. My background was similar to hers.